Hello, hello, hello. Now we are going to talk more about endurance art. We're going to get a bit more into the appeal of it, the way I think it works, why I find it so interesting. This again is not comprehensive, and it certainly isn't expert. This isn't me coming at it from an academic, well-read perspective, but more just me thinking about these performances, thinking about how they work for me in particular. Which I think, I don't know, if you want to know the academic perspective, you can read a textbook. Presumably you're here on the Keats the YouTube channel because you have some sort of affinity with the way I think and the sort of takes I have and the sort of things I find interesting. So hopefully this is more useful to the people watching this than just a dry summary of the literature. Also, I'm too lazy to research. So one thing I think is cool, maybe cool is the wrong word. One thing I think is very sombering and haunting and moving about endurance art is how it replicates the suffering of unseen others. And this is something that I think can be off-putting conceptually about endurance art. Something that when I've tried to talk to friends about it, they bring up as kind of a counter to say this is stupid, is that it makes light of the real suffering of others. That people really are confined in cages like that. People really are homeless like that. People really are without agency and subject to any external force that comes along like that. And I think, though, that it isn't supposed to make light of that. It isn't supposed to say, haha, this thing that people really do suffer through, I think is really neat and fun. But instead it's trying to draw light to these neglected people. That by performing the suffering of these situations, it makes you confront the fact that no, this really is something that happens in reality to tons of other people as well. It's distasteful to view things like homelessness or imprisonment as a performance. For the most part, it's not even possible to see people perform things like homelessness or imprisonment because it's mostly hiding in the margins of society. It's mostly happening in places that you don't go, that you don't see. But even if it is possible, even if you could go and look at a gallery of prisoners or a gallery of homeless folks, it's very, very distasteful to just observe them and to try to glean what their lifestyle is like just by watching them as if they were creatures at the zoo. Of course, that's kind of dehumanizing and reductive. But when it is presented as a performance, when someone is going to say, I'm going to live in this cage as a performance, when someone says, I am going to make myself homeless as a performance, and you get to watch that, or you get to try to experience what it is they're going through, it's a different way than just hearing testimonials from homeless people or reading studies about homeless people. This is a different way that could be uniquely evocative and empathetic for you, that could be more moving, that could rouse in you more motivation to try to help ththese ills of society. So I think that's kind of cool. I think this is something that is maybe often misunderstood about the genre. So we can kind of dive into this further. A major distinction, of course, is that when artists do endurance art, they're subjecting themselves to it voluntarily, right? So as an example, let's look at Touching Shea's outdoor piece. This is the one where he voluntarily lived outside for an entire year. He did not enter any buildings. He did not enter any cars or forms of transportation. He always had the open sky over his head. He lived like that for an entire year. Of course, homelessness is this agonizing tragedy and complete moral failure of the modern era. That isn't to be belittled or made into play. Lots of people are homeless for more than a year. Lots of people never go inside for a year. This is just the reality of it, that his piece is baby tier compared to these people's lived experiences. But Shea chooses to adopt this life, but defines it in terms of rules instead of a lack of opportunities. So people that are homeless because society has deprived them of the opportunity to live inside, to put it very simply. Whereas Shea has given himself rules that he cannot go inside. At any time he could go inside. He could just walk back into his studio, walk into the homes of many friends, I'm sure. I don't know if he had a house itself, an apartment, whatever he was renting during this time, but certainly he could if he wanted to. However, but he didn't, is key. He did spend the entire year outside, even though he always had the chance to go inside. He never took it. Where someone who is truly homeless, if given the opportunity, would go inside. They would start living in a home if that was provided to them. They would probably go to great lengths to make that change if it was possible. And of course, I'm not trying to suggest some sort of hierarchy of like, oh, well, touching Shay is more hardcore than the homeless because he could have gone inside and didn't. Of course, that's absurd. It isn't supposed to be about the ranking, but more the internal ranking of touching Shay, that there's this strange tangled hierarchy here. He submits himself voluntarily to rules that he must involuntarily follow. He creates this authority within himself, higher than the authority of his own bodily craving, that I'm sure on many base animal levels, he craved warmth. He craved the security of a home. He craved things that you can only get while you're inside, like a proper toilet or a shower. But he had to be beholden to these rules that he had created for himself, higher than all of those desires, even though those rules were truly only created by himself. I think this shines a big, insightful light into how human consciousness works. And we can invoke big terms like this inner authority, a super ego, the idea of executive agency, the ability to make yourself do things that you may not want to do, because on a higher order, you know that you have to do them. It's all very complex psychological stuff. And I don't really want to get into a whole big Freudian discourse here, but it's just quite interesting to me, the way that this is revealed in something like endurance art, that you can like subvert your own needs. You can place arbitrary things above physical cravings. And then if I want to go even further and get into like neurobiology and get on my Julian Jaynes shit, the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind, we can talk about how this reflects on religious thought and things like that. Hearing an authority from God, manifesting in your own mind and deciding these are the rules that I must abide by in order to get into heaven, which may be in conflict with your desires on earth. I don't know. It's all very, very fascinating to me. It's a big, big topic that I can't really cover in any sufficient depth here. But I think endurance art really shines a unique light on it, that we get to see unique shadows being cast into this dark depths of how consciousness works, how we think. But we got to move on. Transcending human limitations. There's a quote from Marina Abramovich that I really, really like. She said this in reference to her other rhythm pieces. Rhythm 0 was the final rhythm piece, but there was other ones where she did things like blast herself in the face with an industrial fan until she passed out, stab herself with a knife. She played the knife game where you stab between the spaces of your fingers. She did that and recorded it, and then played back the recording, and every time she messed up and stabbed herself in the recording, she had to dutifully stab herself again. Anyways, speaking of these performances, she said, once you enter into the performance state, you can push your body to do things you absolutely could never normally do. And I truly believe in the absolutes that she uses here, that you could never ever make yourself do this under normal circumstances. It is the context of performance. And how does this differ from the performance state of sport? That when you're in competition, you're able to push yourself past the limits you would have if you were just doing it on your own. Or how does it differ from Kierkegaard's concept of the knight of faith, who believes in impossible things, who has boundless hope, because they believe in the miracle of God making all things possible, and thus is able to do things that if it wasn't for this absolute faith, they would never be able to do. It's a very interesting concept. You can look at the Wikipedia article about it. I don't think it differs really all that much from these other kind of transcendental states, where you start to do things that you normally wouldn't do. Things like trances, flow states, hypnosis. Again, it really delves into questions of consciousness, of how the mind is operating. But there are many different modes of accessing a state where you can start doing things that almost feel superhuman. And this one is interesting because the inner authority that kind of pulls you up to that level is the like hypothetical, not yet secured existence of the art that will exist if I succeed in my performance. And I think that's very interesting. And I think probably a lot of artistic creation involves like a similar transcendence. I don't know. What's a good example? Like, I'm going to perform this very, very difficult piece. If it wasn't for the fact that I thought performing a really difficult, I don't know, violin solo or whatever, I can't play violin, but imagine I can. I really, really want to play this piece. It's so difficult. I'm going to have to like practice my ass off. And then when I really perform it, it's going to take this superhuman effort to just get through it. But I have to do it because the piece won't exist. The performance won't exist if I don't do it. I'm going to devote myself to writing my thesis for 12 hours a day and pouring all this research into it, all this hard work, because it won't exist otherwise. I need to submit myself to that higher authority of the hypothetical existence of the art. So I think this exists, in all sorts of artistic creation, but in endurance art, I think it's very explicitly highlighted because you really, really have to suffer to make it, and the suffering is like the point. So it really explicitly highlights like how much you are transcending all reasonable limitations of your body in order to accomplish this. Another interesting thing is how it makes you re-understand time performing endurance art. Many of them are based on time, either doing something for a very, very long time or doing something that will feel like it's taking a very, very long time while doing it because it's so uncomfortable, so miserable, so painful. And endurance itself has, of course, the same word roots as duration. So endurance has kind of like a time component very much baked into our understanding of it. Time is a universal absolute. Every conscious entity experiences time at the same rate. That's just a physical reality. That's just how physics is. And until you start getting into relativity and approaching the speed of light and stuff. But none of us are ever going to approach the speed of light in any meaningful way. But the subjective experience of time varies. And at least we believe this on a very colloquial level, that we will say, time flies when you're having fun. And it really does feel like it, right? Like I'm sure no one would deny the sensation of time passing unexpectedly quickly under some circumstances. Maybe you're in kind of like a flow state. You've become really absorbed in a game that you're playing. Maybe you're just having a very good time. And alternatively, when you're just sitting there bored, watching the clock, time slows to a snail-like crawl, right? Everyone has experienced that. And I think in performing endurance art, or even just witnessing, even just trying to appreciate the performer through witnessing their performance, you really explore the sensation in a very unique, deep way that I think could give you a profound experience in just such a severe re-understanding, a re-estimation of how time is passing. So I think that's kind of cool. Disproportionate sacrifice. Again, endurance art takes a whole long time. A lot of it is done in a performance, and performed in a public setting, so you can just go and watch it whenever you'd like. But because of how long it is, it's extremely, extremely unlikely that any given person would witness the entire duration besides the performer. Others just have like viewing periods, like touching she, would designate certain days, a couple days a month, that you could come in and watch him be in his cage, or go see him live outside, go see him roped together with another artist. Anyways, Others, it's not viewable at all during the performance, but they just have retrospective exhibits that show like documentation of the performance. Oh, somebody did this every single day for a year. Here's the pictures of them doing it every single day for a year. No matter what, the effort put into the performance is rendered down into something much, much smaller when seen by the audience. That for all of the hours, days, years of enduring, the audience takes it in within minutes. The audience summarizes what that involved into just something tiny. And this again is true for almost all artistic creation to varying extents, that more work is put into creating it, then more time is spent creating it, more effort is spent creating it, than is necessary to digest it, to appreciate it. Maybe not 100% true, but it's a varying extent true for pretty much everything. And again, it's kind of like one of the largest ratios here, that all of these hours of sometimes like excruciating pain or boredom is rendered down into something that is just kind of more conceptual, that is just the statement, wow, he punched that time slip every hour for a year, right? It's just like a one sentence summary, but so disproportional to the sacrifices that he made to his mental health, to his sleep, to his physical body in order to do that. That's interesting though, right? I don't know. So what matters to me with this disproportional sacrifice, with really trying to take in how much was put into something as you kind of see it at such a surface level, at such a skim, is that it creates this heaviness that kind of lurks behind the project. And in order to truly appreciate and conceptualize an endurance art program, you gotta fathom something that's very, very deep and heavy. Let's look at the Touching Shea book. It's physically a heavy book. I'll haul it over here. I'll turn the light on. Something very lively is happening outside. It does not look particularly socially distanced to me. Okay, anyways. So I bought this book a little bit ago about Touching Shea. It's called Out of Now, and it is first a collection of essays on his work written by the person who put the book together, then a collection of reproductions of the documentation of his work. So for example, for the cage piece, we see various pictures of the cage and him scrawling out the days, and then it also includes the daily photographs that he took, and these recollections of the evidence of it take up the majority of the book. For the time clock piece, you can see every one of the time slips, each of them with 24-hour increments punched out. He includes a table of all the times that he missed punching the clock on the hour every hour because he was asleep. Maybe he was slightly late, slightly early. In total, he screwed up 133 times out of 8,760. So that's pretty good. Pretty dutiful. And then also the pictures that he took every hour. And it just goes on and on and on. Big chunks of the book that you're just kind of drawn into it. This is a collection of maps of everywhere he went when he was living outside in Manhattan. Every day he would mark out the route he took and note where he did things like light fires or get food from street carts and stuff. This is the performance where he was roped together with Linda Montano for a year. The rope piece. This one's a little more fun. It's just a collection of Polaroids of some incidents and stuff. I think there's a picture every day of them roped together. And then also they taped conversations between themselves every day for a year, and there's scans of all the tapes. Anyways, and then it's concluded by a long interview and a selection of letters that other artists had sent him in support. Mostly in support. Some of them are just like, you're insane. Yeah, really cool book. And I think a good example of the heaviness that I'm trying to get across here. I just love this book in general. Probably should use stuff from it for 5 minutes. I don't know if that was 5 minutes. There's a lot I could talk about in this book. I think it's really cool. Some of the images are really striking and moving to me. And again, just the sheer heaviness of all the evidence that was generated of these performances, that it's just page after page of photographs, page after page of time cards. Makes it a really unique book. And just the experience of flipping through and trying to take in each page, each image is quite overwhelming. Good book. Go buy it now. Amazon.com, affiliate link. Just kidding. The feeling, of it slowly dawning on you, the slow comprehension of how much work must have gone into the creation of something. That's a feeling I really like in any medium, in any genre. Just like, wait, whoa, they individually, or they each one is unique. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like some definite examples, but a lot of visual art is like this. That you examine it in detail and you're just like, oh my god, like every little stroke. Anyways, and especially though, like you could look at, one of those gigantic ass paintings in the Louvre and be like, wow, this took a lot of work. But I like it even more, a more abstract piece that seems almost purposeless if the end result is still very inaccessible, that it wasn't all in service of something kind of all-encompassing, that, each little detail, every meticulous input was necessary for this one cohesive output, but like every meticulous input was just for itself, was just for the sake of demonstrating this thoroughness, this intensity, this endurance of intent. That in the end it's still just very abstract, that it's very abrasive, and you're like, whoa. And yet they still went at it for like a year or whatever. This was an example. This happened to me when I was a kid. Long time ago, but it has stuck with me ever since. That I was in an antique bookstore, one that I really love in London, Ontario, called Attic Books. And they had an old leather-bound collection of the works of Alexander Pope, who wrote in the 1700s. The collection was from the 1800s. Alexander Pope is an author that I've never read. I'm told that I should read the Rape of the Lock, that it's fun. And there's a few other like kind of key pieces of his, but I'm certainly never going to read the collected works of Alexander Pope. I don't even know if I'll read the famous works of Alexander Pope. And something about the gravity of it, that these books were like 200 years old, of an author that's even older, whose works are like a total mystery to me, and yet to whom others had devoted their entire professional careers to studying. I can remember it so strongly, this feeling of gravity, that I felt like I was almost going to fall into this shelf full of Alexander Pope books. And I've had dreams about that moment. It's occurred to me in sensation so many times. And I think endurance art is another one that really taps into that like deep feeling of gravity, where once you really conceptualize, once you really begin to appreciate what it was like for the performer to do this, it's just like, bruh. Whoa. I don't know if I'm getting it across well. It's a separate emotion from awe or excitement. It's not hype. It's really hard to describe. It's just this heavy feeling. It's more akin to seeing like, I don't know if there's a good example, but an endurance art, because I'm moving the wrong thing, but whatever. Because of the inaccessibility of the performance, because I can never go back and watch Tashing She actually do these things. I can only just see the photographs and read about it and stuff. The feeling of this heaviness is both omnipresent, that I'm kind of constantly experiencing it as I learn more about it and as I revisit it. But it's also very elusive, that I'll never really comprehend what it was like. I'll never get to see him sitting there in that cage. I'll never get to sit in the cage myself. It's that duality that makes it very, very unique for me, this feeling within endurance art. So, who makes endurance art? Me? I don't know. A common response to endurance art is what's wrong with these people? And if you want to get into the link between mental illness and endurance art, and kind of the mental illnesses that could explain the sort of behavior, that could motivate this sort of behavior, that's a subject that's far too complex for these slides. But it's very, very interesting too. But and of course, I'm all of these artists bring something very personal to bear. It's not just that they have this compulsion, but that there's something personally motivating them, that comes out in their performances, and that they reckon with social context in their performances, that it has meaning within a societal context. But on another sense, though, in their performance, they're very much abstracted as just a human being. And here I would draw a separation. Is David Blaine, or people who do professional endurance saunaing? If you want to learn about that, there's a really cool documentary about people that compete just by seeing who can stay in a super hot sauna for the longest. Very interesting. Or like a marathon runner, an ultra marathon runner. Are those endurance artists? I would say probably no. I would draw a line there, because they train in order to accomplish these endurance feats. It's about the ability to succeed beyond their suffering, that they're able to cultivate their body in a way that it isn't an overwhelming amount of suffering, that it is endurable, and then they compete in these ways. Whereas endurance art is about maximizing the suffering, swallowing that experience whole, without deflecting it, without mitigating it, by preparing yourself, by training, but to just experience it raw, the way anyone else would. That to me is an important distinction. And then this is our final point: the art of living life. And here I have kind of a roundabout explanation of what I mean. I have a friend with whom I have kind of a non-stop an exchange journal, that we just write to each other anything we're thinking, feeling, any experiences we've had lately that the other one might find interesting, or maybe not even that they would find it interesting, that just we want to articulate, that we want to bring out of ourselves in some way. It's a shared space to do that, this little chat box. And it's kind of fun too, because my friend lives in Norway, so there's a huge time zone gap. And it often becomes kind of like an exchange journal, that I'll write some stuff before going to bed. He'll respond to it when he wakes up in the morning, so on and so forth. And this has really led me to a literary appreciation of life, in a more profound and immediate sense than anything else has. That will relay like a complex line of thought that we're struggling with, some moment of maybe like irony or coincidence in our life. It's often unhappy. It's often a bad thing that's happened, but we'll reflect on how that has like a really literary quality to it, doesn't it? Like the twist of it, or the irony of it, or the way it lines up unfavorably with something else poorly predicted, like if that was in a book, because we're both very avid readers, and we're both aspiring writers, that we both aspire to write great masterpieces of literature in our lives. We don't write as much as we should, but we write to each other, and that's what counts. And sometimes what we write, we realize, does have this real literary quality to it that we're seeking in what we read and what we write. Anyways, at one point, there was some very complex situation that he was in, and that I was, something related had come up. I was talking to another friend. I explained my friend's situation, and she was like, whoa. And I told my friend, my friend in Norway, I was relaying your story to a friend of mine, and she thought it was pretty shocking, pretty funny. And he just responded, we call that the art of living life. that he appreciated that his very complex situation that he was enduring, that he was having to live through, had transformed into something with very good artistic merit that was captivating and interesting to an observer. The art of living life. And the idea of considering this performance for an unseen cosmic perspective and choosing how to live your life, prioritizing doing something that would be interesting if observed, if it was seen as a performance, prioritizing that over just mere happiness. It's interesting. Worth considering, because sometimes happiness isn't really even on the table. And you submit to this inner authority of your own creation. I am choosing rules with which to live my life in order to make it interesting. I am choosing to throw myself into situations that are going to be difficult to endure simply because it creates this performance of my life, this art of living my life that is more interesting than it would otherwise. What does this mean on a practical level? Well, I guess this is where we think about endurance art experiments, that we set ourselves up for a 1-year performance, a year of living like this, a year of doing that, a year of not doing this, as a type of endurance performance. And I think this has something to do with perseverance, that in the end it's about like giving yourself a perspective, giving yourself a lifestyle that you can persevere through, that you can endure and make something of, that it becomes something of artistic merit. And this is maybe the ultimate message of Shea's final performance. So basically, he had all these 1-year performances. Then he had a 1-year period of no art. And it's almost like a parody of his other performances. You can see he released a public notice for it, the way he did his other performances. That he... Oh, I can go to full webcam here. That he didn't list any showing dates. It's just a black square. I plan to do a 1-year performance. I do not do art, do not talk art, do not see art, do not read art, do not go to art gallery and art museum for 1 year. I just go in life. The performance began on July 1st, 1985 and continue until July 1st, 1986. Again, seems almost a little tongue-in-cheek, kind of a self-parody, but I think this idea of just persevering through life. And then after that, he announced that he had a 13-year plan. For 13 years until the year 2000, he would produce art, but none of it would be seen. He would just simply go forward in his own life. And in the end, the only piece that was released as a result of this was this very simple message made of scraps of other media. It said, I kept myself alive. I passed the December 31st, 1999. So I think it's all about recontextualizing the suffering inherent in life as something that by enduring you are doing an artistic performance. And so let's keep enduring life. Yeah. I don't know. I hope this made sense. It's been on my mind a lot. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.